Hey everyone, welcome back to another Hobby Collab tutorial. We've got a twofer for you today. That is going to be painting and kitbashing. Kitbashing first, obviously. So today we're going to be working on some Warcry models, and we're going to be kitbashing them into some models we can use for Slates of Darkness. Specifically, we're talking about Gore Chosen of Drom, which is an awesome Khorne model that is totally not a ripoff of Indiana Jones here. The reason I wanted to do this kitbash was I love this model. It's super cool, but we don't play Warcry. Coincidentally, I was also working on some Dark Oath at the time, who, if you look at these two models side to side, you can almost see the natural progression from Chaos Worshipper, Dark Oath, to this totally jacked Gore Chosen of Drom. A little bit of kitbashing. I can throw this guy on the back of a horse, add him to my Varangard force, and then we'll have a nice cornate man with a headdress. So that's what we're going to do. Hope you enjoy.
All right, so as we start our kit bash, this is about where we want to be with our Varangard. Mostly assembled, the head of the mount is off, and the torso is also left off on the Varangard itself. That's because we're going to jump into the Gore Chosen of Drom kit. This is Drom himself, the main guy who looks like he's from Indiana Jones. We're going to clip out his torso, and then we're going to clip out his groin here. RIP to that. But we're also going to clip away the abdomen on the Varangard itself, because we're going to be joining these two parts together. Now, you're going to want to clip it pretty far, and also at a pretty steep angle. I'll have an example shown here. You can see it goes all the way almost down into the saddle there. That's because when we join these two parts, the Gore Chosen of Drom torso is also at a pretty extreme angle, straight off of the sprue. And now I join the two pieces together using Tamiya plastic cement. This is just a standard plastic glue, will do as well. Super glue is also fine. Now you might notice that the two pieces, they don't join up exactly flush, right? The Varangard is much larger, but we're gonna do some green stuff sculpting to cover this gap. So mix up some green stuff. You don't need too much, I always mix too much. And then you're gonna basically make a belt, and you're gonna wrap it around the seam. You're gonna cover up that unsightly joint job between the two kits there. And then you're gonna smooth out the green stuff. Now I'm gonna be using some sculpting tools here to smooth out this green stuff, but this is such a basic job right now, you could probably just use your finger and some water. Maybe not for the next step, because we're gonna be sculpting some fur. But first, I'm going to use some jeweler's chain. If I'm being honest, this is kind of to hide a poor green stuff job. Because I'm covering up this green stuff with that chain, it means less sculpting for me. Now, I want to point out that I'm squeezing it in there because, this chain would be wrapped around tight around this cloth, or in this case, I'm going to be sculpting some fur. But I think that little detail, make sure you squeeze it in, is important. Now, I sculpt fur by using some tweezers and basically picking and pulling at the semi-cured green stuff. There's a couple of different ways you can sculpt green stuff, but this is just my quick and easy method. Now, before we move on, I'm going to start gluing on some parts, specifically his right arm and his head and headdress. That's because these are going to be guides for what we're actually going to be sculpting next. So in a similar manner to his waist, we're going to add a little bit of green stuff around his neck and give him a fur scarf. Now, normally, Drom would have a cape that flows down to the ground, but obviously he's on a horse, so we can't use that part without chopping it up and make it, and it would be really ugly, honestly. So similar method, we're going to use some green stuff, and then we're going to pick and pull with some tweezers. Now, I didn't use the chain this time, but you totally could. He's wearing a necklace anyway. This was just a preference, but if you want chain, go for it. Now, I'm going to use a Varangard shield to cover up a very large gap in his back, because, again, normally there would be a cape there. And then he has a staff. The Drom kit has a staff. I felt like that wasn't that corny, so I replaced it with an axe head with a little bit of clipping. Speaking of clipping, the head I had for the Varangard was very Zinchian, which is totally not okay with Khorne. So I clip off this magical ball hair thing and then glue the head together, those two pieces together, and I'm going to put some horns on instead, because that feels more appropriate to Khorne. Now, what I should have done is I should have dry fitted these. I ended up changing the position of these horns, but the method to attach them is the same. You're just going to use plastic glue. The horns I used are from the Varangard kit, but you can use horns from whichever kit you like. And then you're going to glue the rest of the model together. And that should leave you with something like this. Now, obviously, as I said, I do change the position of the horns to be up like that. So here he is, all ready to be painted up. Now, I'm gonna be doing a bone and with a little bit of blood scheme. So we're gonna start with a black prime. And then from a black prime, we're gonna use Vallejo English uniform as a base coat. So English uniform is a great base coat for a very dry bone color, which is what we're going for. If you were to do something like a swampy bone color, maybe like a waterlogged bone color, you'd probably start with a more green tint. But for today, this brown khaki color is just where we want to be. You'll probably want to apply a couple of coats, at least 2, maybe 3, to make sure you get a really solid base coat. Then after that, you're going to move on to Vallejo medium gray. This is going to be our mid-tone. So the way I went about layering this mid-tone on is somewhat of a zenithal that is from top down spray, basically leaving the previous layer of Vallejo English uniform in the shadows. We get a nice grading going here on the armor panels. Make sure you get the armor on the legs as well. You're going to get overspray onto the other areas of the model, like the mount and some cloth. That's just the nature of using an airbrush. I think another good way to do this, if you don't have an airbrush, I understand not everyone has an airbrush, would be stippling. Stippling creates a great texture for bone. This is just a little bit more expedient with the tools I had. Before we move on to the next step, this is about where you want to be. Looking pretty close to bone already. And then we're going to move on to Vallejo Bone White. This is basically the highest highlight I'm going to go besides edge highlighting. Bone white, it's right in the name, right? Make sure you leave a lot of that medium gray still showing, though. That's the mid-tone, and we want to make sure that a lot of that color is still showing. You don't want to overpower it with this bone white. I use Vallejo Game Color Bone White. There's a Vallejo Game Air Bone White that is basically the same color. And then I'm going to grab Citadel Skeleton Horde, and I'm going to spray this into the shadow areas, really to enhance that English brown. See here, I have a nice gradient going. Just to reintroduce some of that, I don't know, bone colors. It's not brown. It's kind of its own unique color. But look, it wouldn't be Khorne if there wasn't red. We're going to use Vallejo Gory Red to paint all the cloth and the leather straps. We're going to base coat in that. And then we got to do the most painful thing painting Chaos models, the trim. This is going to take the longest time. You just got to bite the bullet and do it. Vallejo Model Color Black is a great color. Goes on in basically one coat. Doesn't mean it's going to be a quick process, though. There's lots to paint, lots of trim to paint on here. Yeah, if you get a little bit of that black onto the bone, it's all right. Just go back with the previous colors and relayer over it. Now, I felt like there was a little too much bone, and I want a little bit more of this black, so I actually paint his pauldron and his forearm armor black, as well as the weapons. Just because I thought it looked nice. It also differentiates, the rider from the mount. Returning with that Vallejo Gory Red, we're going to pick out these cornate symbols on his pauldron, as well as some of the trim on his forearm, which I'll show momentarily. You're also going to do it on the axe here and the back of his headdress. You're probably going to have to end up doing 2, maybe 3 coats with this Vallejo Gory Red. But it's a lovely red, so, look, once you've gotten past the pain of painting all this black trim, this will be a walk in the park. While I'm painting this up, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, we'd appreciate if you could like and subscribe if you enjoy these types of videos, these types of tutorials. Helps us immensely, and we appreciate it. Thanks. Now, what we're going to do next is, so this is about where you want to be. I didn't paint the red leather, but you can see it there, right next to his front legs. Now we're going to paint some skin. This is Vallejo Chocolate Brown. I'm going to be painting him with some darker skin tones. Now, obviously, you can do whatever you want, but this is how I painted him. So, base coat with Vallejo Chocolate Brown. It's a great skin tone. And I'm not going to be doing a super fancy job today on the flesh, despite the fact that it seems like there's a lot of flesh tone. It's actually not that much. And while we're at it painting some flesh tones, I'm going to use Vallejo Whole Red to paint the inside of the mouth and the gums of the mount itself. Then we're going to use Citadel Gore Grunta Fur to paint up this fur, the fur we sculpted. I'm not going to do a very intense job on the on the fur either. This is not like this. You're not going to win demon, golden demon with this paint job, but I think it looks nice. So then over the skin, we're going to use a black wash. This is specifically Vallejo black wash. Now, if you have access to Nuln Oil, just use Nuln Oil. It's a little bit easier. I had to thin down this black wash with medium because it was so dark. Nuln Oil is easier, probably more accessible to most people watching this video anyway. And you're also going to put this black wash / Nuln Oil over all of the red we painted on the armor. It's just to darken it down a little bit. I find that red is one of those colors that, despite it being very saturated, just putting a black wash over it actually makes it look quite nice still. I wouldn't do that with a lot of other colors. So once that black wash is dried on the skin tone, we're going to return with that chocolate brown to re-layer up the skin. So avoid the recesses and paint the higher areas. So you're basically highlighting essentially. So this is going to be his nose, his chin, his abs, which are sticking out here, the top of his shoulder. Just make sure you leave some of that darkened chocolate brown showing through. And of course, don't forget his fingers here. They're very prominent, so make sure you get those as well. And his knuckles. From there, we're going to use chocolate brown and dune bull brown in a 1-to-1 mix to do the final highlights. So this is going to be the nose, the very highest point of his cheeks, maybe a little bit of his eyebrow. Yeah, this is going to be as high as we go for the skin tones today. You can basically go up all the way to white, depending on how reflective you want the skin to be. But for today, that's what we're going to call it on the skin. In a similar manner of relayering over the wash, we're going to return to Vallejo Gory Red and relayer over the red leather, red cloth areas, making sure to leave that wash showing in the recesses. I'm going to do this on all the red, so actually not just the cloth, his armor as well. And the way we're going to go about it on the armor is it's not going to be edge highlighting. It's going to be somewhere between edge highlighting and volumetric highlighting. So, sorry, it's a little out of focus here. Basically, the center of this cornate symbol is where we're going to focus on relayering and highlighting. Just because it's a nice focal point, you know, it comes to this nice crest here, right in the center of the pauldron. It's pretty prominent on this side of the model, so it felt appropriate. You are going to edge highlight the top of that pauldron though as well. Now his forearm, we're only going to relayer one side. And the reason we're going to do this is because if you look at the shape of the forearm armor, it's almost as if only one side would be facing the light, right? The bottom side would basically be in shadow. So we're only going to relayer one side. Creates a nice contrast between the two sides. So yeah, that's why we're doing it in that manner. Also saves us having to repaint the other side. Then we're going to use Gory Red and Bloody Red in a 1-to-1 mix, and we're going to layer yet again. This time leaving that previous layer of just Gory Red, showing, obviously still leaving the shadowed black wash areas as well. We're just going to slowly build our way up to this very bright bloody red. Because when you work up this up to these very bright colors, it leaves a really nice contrast of this like dark red in the shadows and this bright red on the highlights, without having to dip into yellows or oranges as I see some people highlight reds. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a personal preference. I like to keep it all in the same tones, all the reds, and not switch to different colors like yellow. Same thing with his head crest here. We're going to focus on bringing that red into the center of this cornate symbol. just to draw attention there. It's a nice, easy, if not necessarily 100% accurate way to to highlight these pieces. As I mentioned, we are going to edge highlight though, just to neaten it up a little bit. You know, the reason we do edge highlighting is we define the edges and shapes. So not 100% necessary, but it looks nice, so I would just do it. Finally, we're going to use bloody red as the final highlight for this color. Same idea as last time, leaving the previous mix of bloody red and gory red showing. We're going to put this in smaller proportions, mostly focusing on the edges, focal points, sharp areas, and areas we want to draw attention to. You notice here I'm not even really doing any thick layering on this cloth here. I'm only hitting the edges. Now on these armor pieces, I am going to highlight this in this volumetric style, as we mentioned. Although technically this isn't really a volumetric, right? This is a flat surface, so technically this is not how the light would work. But you know, we're breaking rules here. We're doing what looks nice. So then we're going to use Citadel Doom Bull Brown to highlight the fur. Previously, we had put that contrast paint on. Contrast paint's fine, but you know, just adding a couple of more layers on top of the fur just helps bring it out, gives it some depth. Then we're going to use Vallejo Medium Gray, which is the mid-tone color we used on the armor. We're going to paint up all these spikes. I wasn't going to touch these originally, but I felt like, again, the paint scheme was a little too homogeneous, and I wanted to, you know, separate these pieces out. So we're going to mix Medium Gray and Burnt Umber by Vallejo, and about halfway up these horn pieces, we're going to draw some stripes where the mark terminates at the point of the horn, something like this. And then the final third of the horn, so within that mix of Burnt Umber and Gray, Medium Gray, we're going to use some stripes of pure Burnt Umber. And then on the very tips of the horns, we're going to apply a small amount of black, Vallejo black. And then we're going to wash them with Skeleton Horde, which is, again, is the color we used while creating the gradient on the armor itself. So we're keeping the colors in the same family, but it's still going to differentiate these pieces from each other. Then we're going to use Pro Acryl Dark Jade. This is how we're going to do the edge highlighting. Sorry, you got to return to this. So now that you've spent probably hours painting this trim, you're going to go back and spend the same amount of time highlighting it. We're going to do scratchy highlights, right? This is a little more worn look. So with this dark jade, we're going to do scratchy edge highlights around all of the black trim. Sorry. And then within those areas, we're going to use Pro Acryl Jade, so a shade higher. I do a little bit of volumetric highlighting on some of the armor trim here. I also do a little bit of non-metallic metal esque highlighting on the axes. Now, I didn't film that. That was actually done on a whim. I was just kind of painting and kind of got in a groove. I wasn't filming, so if there's a desire to see that kind of tutorial, just let me know. I can definitely put one of those out. But for the sake of this tutorial, I felt like it was maybe not necessary. It's not really the focus of this model. I also leave the chains here. I also leave these black and then highlight with the jade and dark jade. I didn't want to use any metallic paints on this scheme. I've kind of been shying away from them. They're just kind of I don't know. I've been in this mood of not wanting to use metallic paints, while also not being great at non-metallic metal. It's not a great place to be. Anyway, Pro Acryl Bright Jade. Now this is going to be on the very, very edges of those jade highlights. Use this in small proportions. You know, if you use a little bit too much of this color, it'll look funny. Think of this is the highest and brightest highlight you're going to go on the black. Again, very small proportions. Otherwise, it looks kind of funky. There you can see the non-metallic metal almost done on the axe there. But again, didn't film it because I was just in a mood. It was not planned. I just kind of did it. So the mount, we're going to highlight with scale color petroleum gray. I use a top-down lamp, and that's how I determine where to place my highlights. I think that's the easiest way to determine highlights on surfaces like this, because it's a perfect reference. Another thing you could do if you're not sure where to place highlights is I would take a picture with your phone with a light directly above your model, and then use a filter to turn it black and white. And that'll show you exactly where to place mid-tone highlights and highest highlights. All right, then we're gonna mix petroleum gray and medium gray 2-to-1. So you don't wanna add too much medium gray to this petroleum gray, otherwise it'll go up in value too much. So 2 parts petroleum gray, 1 part medium gray. Again, using a top-down lamp as any top-down light source. I guess a lamp isn't necessary, to show you where the next step of highlights is. I don't go super high. I don't even go up to a pure medium gray on this. This is about where I stop on the highlights of the mount. The reason being, I want the focus to be on the rider. I want the focus to be on the armor. I don't want the focus to be on the mount itself, which is a roundabout way of saying I'm just lazy. I didn't want to paint this anymore, the mount anymore. I've painted so many of these things, but the reasoning is at least sound. At least that's what I'll tell myself. All right, then the leather straps. Those are also base coated in black, but we're going to highlight them with MSP Harvest Brown. Scratchy highlights around these leather pieces. The reason we're doing this is because the trim and the mount are base coated all in Vallejo model color black. We need a way to differentiate these. So just by highlighting them differently, it'll imply a different texture, different materials. Don't forget he has some leather straps under his armpit here. So make sure you get all the leather pieces highlighted in this scratchy method. Once you're done with that edge highlighting, we're going to move on to a little bit of edge highlighting for the armor itself. Now, most of it's covered in trim, so there's actually not a ton of areas that you're going to be doing this. You're going to grab Pearl Krill Ivory and do a little bit of scratchy edge highlighting around basically just these the forelimbs of the mount here. Luckily, we spent so much time painting trim that we don't have to suffer through edge highlighting much else. He has a little bit of armor on his on his legs and his shield. Those are some other areas that you're going to apply this scratchy ivory highlighting. Then we spray the entire model with AK gloss varnish. Any gloss varnish will do, and this is because we're going to be moving on to some washes. Starting with Tamiya Deep Brown. We're going to be putting this in all the recesses around the armor of the bone armor here. Now you see these deep, like almost chaos star, and the area, this deep recess below that mouth part on the hindquarters there. Don't bother putting the brown wash in there. We're going to be doing something special with those. If you get it in there, it's fine, but you don't need to. For the mouth, we're going to be using Citadel Sigvald Burgundy. This is just to add a little bit more red. I wasn't thrilled with the whole red. This adds a little bit more depth, but after this, we're going to pretty much leave it. Then we're going to use Abtlung 502 Dark Brick Red. This is an oil wash. We're going to thin it down to an oil wash. And we're going to apply this over all of the black trim, black armor, including his headdress and the weapon itself. This is just to add a little bit more depth. It almost looks a little rusty, if a little more red than your average rust. Just a little more interesting, at least in my opinion. Not necessary, but that's what I did, so I'm showing it to you. And now we're going to use Abtlung 505 Coagulated Blood to paint in those areas I had mentioned before. This like deep recess on the hindquarters here of the armor. nice, bright, bloody red color, because it is Khorne, right? After all, so felt appropriate. Now, we're going to use this same 505 blood neat that is unthinned. We're going to apply a couple of dots in a couple of areas, and then with a very thin brush, we're just going to drag it down. Because it is an oil paint, it doesn't dry very quickly. It gives us time to work with it and drag it down in this nice bloody streaks. Don't you love Warhammer? This is not a necessary effect. I just thought it was kind of cool. I think it added a little bit of interest. It separates the model out. Looks very corny. With a K, not a C. Now, if you notice the orange, the dark brick red we applied to the black armor here, it looks a little messy. What we're going to end up doing later is we're going to be cleaning it with some mineral spirits just to tidy it back up. And finally, we're going to apply a couple of coats of AK Ultra Matte varnish. It wouldn't be one of my videos if we didn't have some AK Ultra Matte. Once that's done, all the finishes will be unified, and then you can move on to the basing. And then when you're done with that, that should leave you with something like this. And here is our Slaves to Darkness, Gore Chosen of Drom. I had a ton of fun putting this model together, had a ton of fun painting it. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you'd like, I think this guy will be hitting the table pretty soon on one of our AOS battle reports, if you didn't know we do those. So hopefully we'll see y'all then, and hopefully you'll see him soon enough on the table. But until then, I'm going to say goodbye. See you guys next time.